welcome back to the Ink Sink. I am Annie.
I'm Kaylee.
We are celebrating readers, leaders, and word nerds on the publishing podcast for the rest of us.
I love it.
Thank you.
Annie just came up with a new hashtag.
Not just now. It was a little while ago.
Oh, okay.
I wrote it down on my notes. I was reading.
Oh, okay, fair enough.
Yes, that's our new tagline. Kaylee, we are knee deep in season 2. Actually, we're like ankle deep in season 2.
We're ankle deep,
point.
really,
yeah.
at this point, yeah.
I am absolutely floored constantly by the fact that we are in season 2.
That's so
First
good.
of all, we have been doing this show
You're
for a
great.
year. This is crazy. And we have 20 subscribers on Spotify. 20 entire people.
That's double digits twice.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
And I thought only like 4 people listened, including us.
I know I listen on YouTube because nobody listens on YouTube, so I'm like bumping our
So we have 6 subscribers on YouTube and 20 subscribers on Spotify.
and one of them.
I don't get to see our numbers on like Apple or the other podcatchers. So maybe we have like 1 million Apple listeners.
Very big on Apple.
If we do
We're Schrodinger's Apple celebrities.
That's right. We'll never know because I can't ever log into Apple now that I've said that.
Yeah. Yep.
I can't look. If you do listen to us on Apple, as a heads up, Apple is the only podcast platform that does charge us to host our podcast on there. So if you would like to keep us free on Apple, please support us. I think you can go to like anchor.fm/the-ink-sync/support to support us. And it's like 99 cents a month if you want to. Just letting you know, if you listen on Apple, it's difficult to get on Apple.
That is fair.
I don't know. I never thought about streaming. Maybe we should be on Twitch, but I don't want to stream our shit. I want to edit it.
I mean, they do like re-airs or whatever, so
Okay.
we don't have to be live.
Okay. That's true.
Look, girl, Critical Role also established a buffer so they could add in special effects.
Did they
on
really?
Oh yeah, no, that was like
That's
100% a thing. Like they had like,
That's
$2 in a box of Tic Tacs, but
For those of you who follow us on Twitter, you already know this, but for those who don't, as a heads up, we created a Substack, which is basically a blog. But it's a newsletter style blog, so you can go subscribe on Substack and you will get an email in your inbox the next time that we post specifically a transcript. Kaylee and I are big on accessibility and making sure that everyone is able to read/see/listen to the podcast if they want to. So we're going to be putting our transcripts up on our Substack, and our link tree is available everywhere that we are. So you can click on the link tree and get to the Substack, our Anchor, our YouTube. You can check out our Bookshop page, follow us on all our socials, blah, blah, blah. If you'd like to, we also have a tip jar available. If you don't like going through Stripe, you can go through PayPal on Linktree. I think that's all of our administration stuff. I think that's everything I've done in the past couple weeks.
Annie's a rock star. Just in case anybody was wondering, she's amazing.
Oh, thanks. And if you want to see a link to all of the poems that Kaylee read on our poetry episode, that is in the transcript. The Tumblr one, as well as the Emily Dickinson, E.E. Cummings, the Aeneid, and Dante's Inferno. All of those are in there, as well as Here Bullet and Her Soul Out of Nothing are all in that bookshop link. All right, let's move into the actual news, Kaylee, as we have been recording for half an hour.
Meandering around, stopping to smell the tulips.
They're great tulips, aren't they?
They're lovely.
All right, so the first thing that I found absolutely fascinating, and I wanted to talk about it right up top. This is a thread from Ask Historians. We talk a little bit about what goes into books and money and what doesn't. And interestingly, a question I get a lot is kind of about this, is like, what is the difference between a book that's kind of just like a generic, we put bestseller in quotes, that sells like 5,000 copies or whatever, and one that sells millions of copies? Like, what is that difference? Where is that line? What makes something kind of go from like something that's a bestseller to like something everyone and their mother has read and can, discourse on or whatever. Like, I'm thinking like things like Eat, Pray, Love, or The Da Vinci Code, perhaps.
As a random
Pick
example.
That one completely randomly. Yeah. So this is a thread from Reddit. A Reddit user went to our Ask Historians which is a wonderful subreddit. People ask questions and historians will answer. It's actually very heavily moderated, so there's a lot of mods in there making sure that the stuff is historically accurate and well sourced and stuff, which is very, very cool. And the user wanted to know why on earth we all went, in their words, apeshit for the Da Vinci Code. And we did. Do you remember that? Like, the Da Vinci Code was everywhere.
So let me tell you something. This is a very funny thing for me. So you're correct. And I know this because I was graduating college and I went to Greece like the summer of my last year with my classics professor. The Da Vinci Code had come out, right? So they did Angels and Demons as like the second movie or something.
Yes, right.
So that was in theaters, and my professor hated those movies, and he took us all there, and we hate watched them apparently. And it was just him just crapping all over this movie for 2.5 hours, and we left. And then immediately started giving him so much shit because it was just like that was how prevalent it was. This man, he's a deacon, like a otherwise very genial, responsible, like very personable, professional person, but like just frothing at the mouth for the pseudo history that was present from Dan Brown. And it goes into it in this thread a little bit, and one of the responses is because he is a true believer,
right,
who wrote with his own conviction.
Yes.
And other people are just like, yeah, sure, why not? And like didn't actually do their own research and just, cheers to you, sir.
No, it's true. A lot of people genuinely read the Da Vinci Code and or Angels and Demons and were like, wow, that must be true. It's in this fictional thriller.
Dan Brown's he told me he can't lie. It's illegal.
He's created an Indiana Jones type character, and we all know how accurate those were.
Oh, it was so funny.
I loved it. So
everything about that response, like, it's so interesting.
It's fascinating. So a Cold War historian chimed in, going a little bit out of their purview, if we're being honest. But they had some
critical thinking doesn't have borders.
That's right. So this person is a moderator on the subreddit, so they were able to do some deep dive research on and found some interviews with Dan Brown and pulled on some old blog posts to talk about it. But basically, yeah, as Kaylee said, Dan Brown was a true believer. He genuinely believed all the things that he had written in these books. But I think one of the really interesting things was that for specifically the Da Vinci Code, like when it comes to Indiana Jones, like we have ground penetrating radar. We know that like temple in that canyon in Jordan does not have a secret chamber with the Holy Grail in it. Like we know that. We can confirm that. Can we confirm that one dude 2,000 years ago didn't maybe have a kid? Not really, not as easily, certainly. And you certainly can't prove a negative, so you can't prove it didn't. So there's a little bit more like nuance of could this possibly be real? And so that was something that really, really helped it along. And then also, and this is a little bit cynical, I guess, but Dan Brown worked very closely with his agent and his publisher to specifically come up with something that was
going to drum up
controversy.
Yeah.
Controversy. It was going to be salacious. It was going to be shocking. And to the point where the publisher just saw the proposal and was like, yes. And they started the marketing plan then.
It was interesting because, like, his agent jumped ship from Simon & Schuster and took Dan Brown with him. And it was not a, like, done deal. It was like they had to sell this to their new publishing company. So they workshopped it because they were like, look, we know Angels and Demons didn't do as well.
Yeah.
I think there's a reason why. Let's start now. So Dan Brown got like, I want to say $400,000 for
a 2-book deal, which is a very large advance. It's not the largest advance I've ever heard, certainly not for an author with a track record, but that's a large advance.
He had a track record in that he delivered a finished product, which, to be fair, is hard. Like, that is difficult as somebody that has finished stories and also hasn't finished stories. I have 3 out of 4 chapters on my Tron fanfiction that have just lived in that state for years. Setting that aside, the publisher thought, yes, you're right. This does have the
bones,
seed of controversy. This has a fantastic element of something that will inspire people to react.
We were
so
talking
it was
about Dan
interesting.
Brown,
I think that's fascinating because like they saw that, yes, with the idea that you workshopped, which they specifically went in to use a non-standard marketing campaign. They wanted to generate outrage and interest and intrigue.
Yeah. We would call that guerrilla marketing probably now.
Grassroots is what they called it. In the
Yeah.
They were ready. Like the publishing company knew what they were about.
Yeah, so it was a combination of that publishing company needing basically to have a winner and then having a very juicy, salacious topic to market a book on. And that just, I guess we hadn't had a book like that in a while. I don't remember a book like that happening in a while for sure.
I was talking about how like it's not that the first time that particular like idea or concept of
despite what Dan Brown might think, that was not the first book to have that topic.
Right. And it's not even the first like historic examination and like this is what evidence could support it or couldn't support it. It just wasn't widely discussed.
Yeah, it had been a while since the last Indiana Jones movie. It had been a while since we'd seen something like that. And it was like, it suddenly became a favorite topic
the national treasure.
Yeah, of like every blog to be like
the museum
debunking this or talking about like where it went wrong. But like, here's like, obviously we all read it. So here's, more money for Dan Brown.
Yep.
I think that there's like a lot of people who would kind of look at that and say that's kind of cynical. Like we want to think of authors, typing away and coming up with creative ideas out of nowhere. And that's true, but also publishing is a business. And
that was the first book.
Yeah, I don't exactly. And it didn't sell very well. I don't think it's, ridiculous. Right now we have entire companies that we call book packagers that just shop around for authors to write an idea that already exists, that's been like, vetted by marketers and stuff like that. So I'm
Cooking romance novels. We were talking about the genres and like things that you see one really well, one sells really well, and then suddenly there are 17.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So this is just, we saw it at the beginning. Yeah, instead of later on. But yeah, I thought that was absolutely fascinating and I was really glad. And thank you so much to that Cold War historian who took time to
oh my God, it was
research Dan Brown this week.
What that person did a dive. Like, it was an essay response.
I could tell. Yeah.
God bless historians.
Yes, absolutely. Moving on to more FBI stories. Fascinating story, intersecting with our love of libraries as well. This comes to us from the Washington Post. It turns out that the FBI has been using library checkouts as part of its surveillance operations for decades, specifically from the 70s to the 90s. And I read this and I sent it to you. Like, this felt so part of the this is our culture war right now political mentality. But this was decades ago. This is in the 70s, so way before the recent book bans.
Yep. I had to read this like as quickly as possible, so unfortunately,
sorry. It was in the Washington Post. There was a paywall, so I had to get it to Kaylee a little bit later.
Unfortunately,
yeah.
But
side note, while Kaylee is pulling this up, if I can make a quick little plug for libraries, you might have a newspaper subscription through your library. You should probably chat to all of our listeners.
I should also your
also to Kaylee,
to me. Hi, I got it. I picked it up.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, like we joked about Craig, your FBI agent or whatever, like
right.
Steve, your CIA like analyst that's listening to your internet conversations, but like probably actually there was a dude who was reviewing like the stuff that you checked out.
Right.
I used to check out so many books when I was a kid. Like, my mom had to pay like a $30 fine one time because she didn't get back to the library for like a few days.
Oh,
and
no.
Didn't realize how many books we had checked out. And I don't know how, like, she was there the whole time.
No.
But yeah, I can't even imagine.
You just weren't making trouble. She wasn't paying that much attention.
I wasn't doing drugs on the street.
That's right. I feel like a $30 library fine is probably better than, drugs on the street. So
worse. I understand not wanting to spend that $30.
Right.
However.
Yeah, I loved, by the way, in this story, you see librarians, much like today, just getting like, excuse me, privacy means privacy. In this place, in this library, people are free to learn. And sometimes they're going to learn things that you don't want them to learn. And librarians are going to, we're going to stand up to you, FBI. And I love that. I know. I like that we're seeing that today too, you know? We're kind of seeing a little bit of it.
I mean, I also appreciate that it's a consistent, like, culture in libraries of activism and resistance.
Mm-hmm. I was listening to an interview with a librarian, a school librarian, somewhat recently during the recent book bans. I'll see if I can find it and I'll put it in the show notes. But she was talking about how brave and how much she respected her students who were brave enough to come check out books about sexuality. You know, she's like, the courage it takes to come in, pick that book up, walk to the library desk, look the librarian in the eye, take the book out, walk that book through the school to your bus or to your car, and then to read it. She's like, I want to defend that courage. I want to be able to stand up to these book bans and this school board. And she said, you know, I want to do this for them. You know, I'm honoring their bravery. And I really appreciated that librarians do seem to have been doing that at least since the 70s, probably for a lot longer.
Right. And it's so interesting because, like, we're fighting that with these book bans right now. Like, the argument, you know, from parents is like, well, it should be a discussion between, like, parents and their kids. And kids are like, we have questions. It's not just, like, about sex. It's just, like, about things that are related to reproduction and intimacy. Mm-hmm. And parents just don't know. Like, they don't know the answer.
Sure. So it's a little bit of hubris, I would say, as a parent to sit here and say, oh, I know everything. You have to only ask me and no one else. Like, okay. I mean, are you sure you know everything, though? Because it seems really weird if you would know everything.
Yeah, you don't know everything about anything else.
I would have questions about this.
I have new questions.
Are you Google? Like, what's going on?
I have new questions
Is
now.
my mom a robot?
Oh my god, AI hacked. Finally.
That's right. This is the true promise of AI.
We breached.
I do have a couple corrections, though, from our last news episode. There was a little bit of confusion when we were talking about author and pub worker salaries, because authors and publishing workers are actually two separate groups. And we were talking about the publishing workers having to have salaries commensurate to living in New York and authors making a very, very little money. And obviously that didn't quite make sense if you thought those were the same group. It's separate groups. Authors usually work on a freelance basis, which is why they are making at a median about $10,000 a year. And the pub workers, the people at HarperCollins, are making closer to 40 to 45K a year as a base salary because living in New York is so expensive. I think I looked it up one time and the average rent in New York is about 40K a year. So making 45K is not enough to live in any, like, even just to live in a physical space. Yep. So they did need more money, and they were able to get that
for $40,000 in New York.
Exactly. They were able to, for those of you who haven't been following, the HarperCollins strike was successful. They went back to work within the past few weeks. We are recording this in late February, so they just went back to work. Congratulations, guys.
It has been 3 months since February started.
It kind of feels that way.
You guys don't understand, like, so much has happened.
It's not great.
But anyway, good for you guys. You stuck to your guns, you froze your asses off, you went through it, so cheers.
Absolutely. And on that note, I did find a thread on authors, even best-selling authors, and how their revenue breaks down, and I just kind of wanted to run through that so that you can kind of see there's some myth-busting happening in there, and it is from one of Kaylee's favorite authors, T. Kingfisher.
Absolutely delightful lady.
But yeah, one of the things that I think people don't always realize is that authors do write on a freelance basis, which so they have the exact same pitfalls as, you know, I always use the example of actors, right? People always talk about starving actors because they are having problems.
It's always feast or famine. Like, you get your very, very rare feast when you get paid, and you get paid like a huge chunk of change, but then that's supposed to like, then you need to keep getting work.
Right. And you have to pay taxes on that huge chunk of change.
Sucks. So T. Kingfisher, who's also Ursula Vernon, was reviewing like how it actually breaks down for authors, even best-selling authors, even authors who have sold a million copies of
to be clear, is way more than the average author.
Oh, yeah. Like, we talked about this before. I'm not sure if we've published this particular, like, kind of statistic, but, like, selling what was it, like, a couple thousand copies is making it big.
Yeah. Getting you in the NYT New York Times bestseller list only takes, like, 5,000 copies. So, and T. Kingfisher has sold millions. So, you would think just from those numbers that she is living in it.
Super, super well off. So anyway, so this...
No.
It starts with somebody going like, in this case it was Ballinares was the Twitter handle, who was just like, I don't know if I'm being dumb, but it's sort of terrifying to me that you can move 7-digit copies, that's 1 million copies, and that's still not set for life territory. And then so T. Kingfisher, aka Ursula Vernon, was like, it's not naive or dumb, it seems like it should be.
Right.
And yet and then so she actually started to break down like how all that maths out. And so for those of us who are intimidated by math, she made it very easy. So don't worry about it. So she said that the Dragon Breath books sold for basically $14, $13.99 for hardcover, and then $8.99 for paperback. So
yeah, there's a lot of like business math in there because some of that money does have to go to the people who actually produced the book, the people who printed the book and put up the money for all the paper and the cover design and the editors to make sure that you didn't print any typos, and the marketing people. Everybody
that went into the production of the book. So like at the end of the day, maybe you get $1.
Exactly.
$1 a book. And then outside of that, you have to pay taxes, and you have to pay any people that you personally like may have contracted with. Ultimately, maybe you made $60,000 off of the lifetime of that book. So like,
and it goes on over years. Like you might be selling this book over 10, 20 years. So you're not making like $1 million immediately. You're making $1 million over 10 years, which is what a lot of other people make at like a mid-range salary job.
Sure. Yeah. So it was a lot as a person that is operating in a creative space. Like it is really a lot, and it's a labor of love. Like every writer, every editor, every person that's involved in this industry is passionate about what they do. And at the end of the day, like, respect, because you're not in there to get rich. And that's like a lot of the comments are like, well, this was like really eye-opening, and why did you add so much math?
There were, people being like, can you also, not with the numbers, like, maybe?
Yeah, but like, it's good that people like understand going in, because, you know, as passionate as you are, like, it's just, we were talking about this, I think also, Neil Gaiman had said, like, don't make this your thing if you're not independently wealthy. Like, have another thing and like write on the side until you can get established, and if you ever get there. Write because you want to write what you want to write, but overcommit yourself to something that can't sustain you, because it's not, we've talked about this before, it's unfortunately not a even mid-range game. Like, it is a rich person's game
a lot of times,
unfortunately. So unfortunately.
Yeah. And I'll have that link for you in the show notes if you guys want to take a look. I'll also have it in the transcript on our brand new Substack.
Yeah, girl. Props to T. Kingfisher for like keeping it real.
Yes, and for like keeping those records and knowing all that off the top of her head. That was really, really helpful and impressive, if I'm honest. Moving on, contributors to the newspaper of record, the New York Times, have written an open letter to the editorial standards editor to protest the paper's treatment of trans people. So some progress, perhaps, on the horizon. Basically, this comes to us from LitHub, and this was an open letter from people including Roxane Gay and other contributors, other high-profile contributors, asking the New York Times to do better. That in a lot of its coverage, there are tacit claims of trans people being crazy or infectious or somehow wrong. And they're saying, look, your editors need to do better. Your editors need to stop this language from going through. And also your writers need to stop acting like this is okay. And I kind of appreciated that it was a lot of people signed on to it. So my guess is that it was like one of those things that was like the letter was written and then it was sent around to everyone and have to, add your name and things like that, which is, totally fine. Yeah. But I don't know that it was like Roxane Gay wrote this along with everybody else. But I did absolutely appreciate that. I mean, one of the things that we know for a fact is that trans people are not infectious. You are not infected with transness. So I was really appreciative of that, and hot on the heels of that, the Cambridge Dictionary updated its definition of woman. Yes, It was very sweet. in a sea of bad news, I appreciated these two stories kind of coming within the same week.
Yeah.
So Cambridge Dictionary updated its definition of woman. You can go to dictionary.cambridge.org and look up woman. And you'll see that it includes people who identify as women who may not be perceived as women by other people, but who are. And dictionaries usually pride themselves on being descriptive rather than prescriptive. So what they're saying is that they are reflecting a change that already exists. If someone is a woman, then they are a woman. It doesn't matter what, Steve down the street says about your friend. Your friend is who they are. It doesn't really matter. You don't need to deal with the biases of other people when it comes to using a word. You can just use it.
Which is wonderful. Like, honestly, like, more than anything else, like, the fact that dictionaries are responding is heartening, because it is, we've talked about this, like, the vocal minority, and that is 100% a thing. Like, most people aren't out there just, like, pitching hatred and bile into the world.
Yeah.
So, props.
Moving on to our favorite news section. We have a new head of the American Association of Publishers. We are on the record as being on the side of libraries in the libraries versus AAP conflict, but we still, of course, appreciate the American Association of Publishers. These are all the publishing companies in America, and they are giving us the books that we love, and we're here doing this podcast because we love books.
We just want you to do better. That's all. We think you can do better. We just want you to do better. We're like the disappointed parent. We're not mad. We're just disappointed.
Yeah. We just want you to be nice to libraries. Anyway, the AAP has appointed a new chair of the board of the association, and that is Julia A. Reedhead. Congratulations.
Good for her. Absolutely. Apparently she's been on the board for a few years now at this point.
Yeah, and she's also the chairman and president of W.W. Norton & Co., which is another publishing company.
It's very cool. Like, good for you.
Absolutely.
And then, like, that kind of trails into the next...
Yeah, you want to intro it for us?
Yeah, so we've got new Latina authors breaking into the book industry and telling us about their experience, which was a little bit difficult, unfortunately, but also ultimately heartening, which is that, they've, the issues that they've had trying to break into the publishing industry and get their books picked up, breaking into the wider sphere of influence as authors, and ultimately how they're succeeding, which is awesome.
It's really wonderful. I'm going to run through the list of authors and their books really quickly so that you will be able to, if you want to, search for them, but I will also have this list in our show notes. Tamika Burgess, author of Sincerely Cicely. Her book had just come out when this article had come out, so it was full of congratulations for her. Claire Jimenez, author of Staten Island Stories and What Happened to Ruthie Ramirez, which was one of the most anticipated books of the year.
I'm so excited.
Congratulations.
Awesome.
Yes, absolutely. So Ella Caron, author of Viva Lola Espinoza, who it seems like had a really long but fantastic journey into becoming a published Latina author. So congratulations. Jennifer Maritza Macaulay, author of Scar On, Scar Off and When Trying to Return Home, who also did, had, I think, really good advice for what to do when you deal with rejection. She said, pretty much everything I've ever done has been rejected by someone before it got accepted. It's part of the process. I liked that. I thought that was really sweet.
I think that also, I'm going to go through and confirm, like, who said this, but, like, what story can you tell? What story do you want to tell that is unique to you and to your passion? And that's the story you've told. And then some people don't want to hear it. Some people don't think they want to hear it, but that's still, you're the only person that could have told that story. So are you going to deny the wider world that opportunity?
Yeah, it was tragic, but hopeful and wonderful. This article is absolutely fantastic. Shout out to Refinery 29. And I'll add this into the show notes, and I will also add all of these books onto our bookshop list for the episode. Moving on to our favorite section. Kaylee, what are you reading?
I actually haven't picked up Harrow the Night, but
You don't have to justify anything to me.
I finished Gideon the Ninth. Actually, let's go back to that because I don't think anybody knows that I finished it. So we're going to start again.
What do you mean? I watched that episode.
Did it say that I had finished it or that I had?
Oh, sorry. Yes, correct. Go ahead.
I just said that I was halfway through. As far
You'd
as
read
they know.
You'd read another page.
I finished Gideon the Ninth. Woohoo! Yeah. And I have the next book. I loved it. I loved the way it ended. I definitely liked the characters more by the end per se than the beginning because they just liked each other more, which I don't necessarily have to personally like the character. I have to be invested in the relationship in anything.
Yeah.
And I wasn't necessarily at the beginning. I was by the end, and the world building is phenomenal.
Yeah.
And like I do really like her writing. Like, her writing is great. Super support, like, her as an author. Great job for you. Because, like, when my brain doesn't want to read something, I almost never get through it.
Mm-hmm.
And I managed to get... It was interesting enough, and the way that you wrote it was approachable enough that when you were able to find your stride in the middle of the book for me, and I still made it all the way through. Like, I got there. So, like, good for you. Super cool book. Loved it a lot. Very interested in the second book. And then I read Nettle and Bone.
That's right. You had been looking forward to that one.
I did.
By T. Kingfisher.
That's true.
Who we talked about earlier in the episode.
It's true. It's an excellent fairy tale book, but the main...
The cover is really cool. I looked at it. Well, I actually bought it for you for Christmas, and then you had already bought it for yourself. Or someone else had gotten it for you. You already had it somehow.
I've got so many, like, double titles somehow for T. Kingfisher, which is interesting because, like, I only have them on Amazon. So, like, it says when... Anyway, it doesn't matter.
No, it's fine.
It was just funny.
I, in fairness, did not look at your Amazon before I bought it. I just saw.
I get it. No,
I just saw new T. Kingfisher book.
Like,
I know
hey,
Kaylee likes, and then you were like, "Oh, I got this new book by T. Kingfisher," and I was like, "Of course you did."
So read that before you read Sword Heart. And
okay.
I only say that because this is a much shorter fairy tale book.
Okay.
And then when you read Sword Heart, and she wrote, I think it started as a short story, and then it became like this. It's basically like a baby novel, a little more than a novella, but not quite.
Okay.
And I really do like the main character, and I like the focus on, like, her devotion to, like, her sister, and, like, making sure that her sister doesn't, like, bad things don't continue to happen, like, getting her sister out of a bad situation, or at least salvaging it as much as possible. And the complicated relationship, like, with their mom. There is a romance subplot, kind of, and it's definitely the same vibe as in Sword Heart.
Okay.
But not as well fleshed out.
Are the characters related, or is it a totally different universe? They're just similar vibes.
Similar vibes.
Okay.
And really cool fairy tale and world building in a fairy tale style. This was 100% a fairy tale.
All vibes, no chaser.
Mostly. Like,
Nice.
It definitely was certainly heavier on that.
I'm into vibes.
And then remind me later because I want to loan you a book.
Okay. I haven't given you Sword Heart back. I've had it for like a year.
So many books to loan you. I don't care. Just take them, Anna. Read them. We can talk about them.
All right.
But there's another one, speaking of fairy tales.
I will say my mom called me the other day and was like, I recommended you a book a month ago. Why have you not read it? And I was just like, Mom, you don't understand. I have a book podcast. All people do is recommend me books.
I have so many to read.
This is it. There are people who I haven't spoken to in 10 years who message me and go, excuse me, have you read this book? And I'm like, hi. No. Hi. I haven't heard from you in a long time.
I heard you in a book
Tell
podcast.
me what you're reading. All right, I'll put it on my list.
It's so fun.
My husband gets really frustrated because he has recommended several books to me. And
Did you ever read all of the Johannes Cabal series?
No, I sure have not. I also haven't read all of the David Wong series. I also haven't read 11/22/63 or all of the Lightbringer series. I'm a big fan of starting series that my husband recommends to me and then not finishing them. Why does he keep recommending series to me?
He was asking for it.
It's true. And in fairness, the one my mom gave to me was also the first one in a series. Y'all need to stop trying to manipulate me into reading series, okay?
Annie, what are you reading right now?
I am reading a book by Susan Orlean called The Library Book, which it's nonfiction. It's one of those memoir laced with history, where it's a woman who just loves libraries and is doing a deep dive on the history of the Los Angeles Library,
Ooh.
which has had a cast of characters as head librarians. The first one, or not the first one, like one of the first, I think like the first, maybe the third one, she was a Banff And her whole thing was just like settling trivia disputes because she just knew everything. And she like headed up the suffragette movement. And when they were like, oh, okay, well, the library is doing well now because of you, ma'am. So we're going to fire you because a woman shouldn't be in this kind of job when a library is doing well. And so they tried to fire her and she refused to go. She just kept coming into work and doing business as usual. And the guy who was supposed to replace her just like noped out of town until she gave up. He was like, I'm not going to try. I'm not going to fight her.
Like they are all going to her.
Yeah, he's like, listen, this is a you guys problem. You're the ones who fired her. Eventually they got her out after like 3 months when she finally, was like, I hate you people. But then like he himself, the guy who came in, was a character. He had walked from New York to Los Angeles.
Jesus.
It was in the 1800s, but still.
No, that's
still
worse. I feel like that's worse.
Yeah, right. And he had like written, he was one of those people who was a process person. He like created books out of wood pulp by hand by himself to sell sometimes, because he was like, I think it would be really cool if I just made books. And I'm like, bro,
from scratch.
Yeah, literal scratch. Like he felled the tree himself. I don't think he actually felled the tree himself, but who knows? He walked.
He might have. He could have.
Sounds
like it's possible.
West. I don't know how, they didn't mention how long it took him, but anyway, so the framing story that they're using is, so in, I believe it was the 1980s, someone burned down the main central branch of the Los Angeles Public Library.
I know that.
And you can apparently still smell the smoke in some of the books because they still have most of the collection left that survived. It's still in the library.
Very cool.
No, not very cool, Kaylee. A building burned down.
They saved the books.
They did save the book. There's like a beautiful, heartening story of like the city kind of coming together. They formed like a human chain to get the books out of the building.
Of course, that's what I was responding to, Annie. No, not like, you're right. I was thinking, let's just burn down the library. That's
anyway.
Awesome. Well, you said that they saved the books because you could still smell the smoke, and they saved them, and I
they
said,
did
that's
save
cool.
them. They did.
I was directly responding to the thing you had just said.
Anyway, about arson. It's really fantastic. So there is a suspect, a guy who, I think he was arrested for the crime and charged for the crime, but I believe he was let off. So the question central to the book is who did it and why? And if it wasn't this guy, so that's called The Library Book by Susan Orlean. Arson. Like we love arson on this show.
Well, not of libraries though.
No, not of libraries.
Leave libraries alone. They're going through it.
Yeah, they're having a rough time. All right, Kaylee, do you have a Kaylee coda for us for this newsy episode?
Leave libraries alone. They're having a tough time.
Tell them. And the librarians will fight you if you don't.
And apparently the librarians are just always ready to go. Like, they hold my flowers for sure.
Smack down. Librarian, WWE, WrestleMania. Fuck with a library, you get a librarian.
That's right. Evie Callahan would she knows what's up.
Dang right she does. Anyway, thank you for listening to The Ink Sink. I have been Annie.
I'm Kaylee.
And this is the publishing podcast for the rest of us, continuing season 2.
We're in season 2. The second one.
Blue. If you would like to follow us on any of our social media, you absolutely can. You can also join our Substack where we have we will have episode transcripts. Right now I think there's only 1 or 2 up.
Annie's rocking it out.
Doing my best.
She's doing great.
We're also on YouTube. You can check out our Bookshop link. I make sure to post all of the books that we discuss, even the ones that we just talk about in passing. If they sound interesting to you, they will be up on our Bookshop. If you buy a book from our Bookshop storefront, we might get a commission, but more importantly, bookshop.org supports independent bookstores with every purchase. You buy anything, even if you don't select a bookstore, they will put your commission into a pool that just gets dispersed to independent bookstores. Please, please, please help them out. You can find all of the links to that in our link tree, which you can find anywhere you find us: Anchor, Spotify, Apple, blah, blah, blah. And if you would like to support us, you can on Anchor. You can support us on Anchor for as low as 99 cents a month. We also have a tip jar available in our link tree if you don't feel like supporting us on Anchor or on Substack. You know what? That's fair.
But you want to support us? Here's your chance.
I think we need to wrap up this episode.
I'm so sorry.